Unconventional study advice. Let's go. Find a friend in your classes to compete with. Instead of stressing about your grades all the time, instead of thinking about studying like a punishment, you want to start thinking about studying like a game. So you find a friend, and if you guys are in the same class together, or even if you're not in the same class, you decide that you're going to compete against this friend. And whoever can get the best grades by the end of the semester gets something from the other person. So what you're doing here is you're actually gamifying the process of studying. So it's not a punishment, it's not something that you have to dread or something looming over you in the distance that's gonna suck and be uninteresting. Instead, studying becomes a challenge. It's not that you're studying because you're scared that you're gonna do bad, you're not stressed about your grades, but instead you're treating it like a game. So you're studying because you wanna do better than the other person you're competing with. So instead of being worried about a test coming up, you get motivated because you know that if you study hard enough, then you can beat your friend and you can win in this competition. And ideally, you're competing with someone who's as intelligent as you, if not more intelligent. And honestly, it's even better if you choose someone who's significantly smarter than you, because then you're going to be pushed to work a lot harder than you would otherwise. If you choose to compete with a really smart friend, then you're really going to have to kick your studying into high gear and work as hard as possible to keep up with them and beat them. And now my second piece of study advice is the opposite of what you're going to hear from a lot of different sources. So a lot of people will say that whenever you're studying, you should start with the hardest task because that's going to take the most brain power and you want to get it out of the way first so it's not more difficult to do later. So a lot of people will say that if you have a huge essay looming over you, then the very first thing you should do when you start studying is start working directly on that difficult essay. And if you don't have any problems with motivation and you can kind of just get yourself to work no matter what, then sure, the strategy might be somewhat beneficial, but I think for myself and others who sometimes have difficulty finding the motivation to actually get up and study and do the things we have to do, it can be a lot more beneficial to make the first task of studying something easy. So you actually create a segue into the study session and create a sort of foot in the door effect where if you do something small, then it becomes a lot easier to continue and do something harder later in the session. So if I'm unmotivated and I don't want to study it, if I tell myself that the second I start studying, I have to start knocking out this crazy long essay, then obviously I'm not going to feel motivated, I'm going to start procrastinating, and I'm going to do everything I can to avoid doing work. If instead I tell myself that when I start studying, I'm going to do a simple task, it's going to be not that difficult, and I can focus on the essay later, it's going to be a lot easier to actually get myself up, have the motivation to start studying, and once I have that momentum going, it's a lot easier to tackle the more difficult tasks, as opposed to starting with the hardest task first thing. And the final piece of advice is to stop setting goals on how long you want to study, and instead stop studying the second you understand all the necessary information. The amount of time you spend studying is completely irrelevant. If you can understand the material for a test in 2 hours, then there's no sense in studying 4. Studying more hours once you understand the key information is not useful for you or anyone else. No one cares how long you've been studying, it's not impressive, no one's interested in how many hours you spend preparing for a test. Once you understand the material, there's no sense in going over tangential information because you think that for some reason studying more equates to doing better in your classes. It's very easy to feel imposter syndrome when you see these other people studying for 10 hours at a time, especially online. When you go online, you see these 10-hour Pomodoro sessions, people studying for dozens of hours, and you feel like that's required to do well in your classes. Don't be misled. Such a crazy time commitment is not required to do well in any class, as long as you understand the information. And sometimes this might take a decent amount of time for you. Sometimes you may just have to study for hours until you understand the information, but ahead of time, you shouldn't set the goal as the amount of hours you're going to study for, because it sets a false expectation of how long it's going to take for you. And instead of being efficient with your time, instead of studying the most important things for the test that's coming up, you're going to end up going over a bunch of irrelevant information because you're just trying to maximize the amount of hours you're studying. You're trying to sit there for longer and cram more information into your head, even if it's not particularly useful or effective. So listen, to do better in your classes, start competing more with your friends, start with the easiest tasks first, and stop setting the time frame as the goal. Now, if you're still here, thanks for watching, I appreciate it. If you like videos like this on studying and productivity for college students, I really recommend you subscribe. There's gonna be a whole lot more videos like this soon, but until then, I'll see you guys.